You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Welcome back to Cards to the Moon. My name is Clark, and co-hosting with me, as always, is Hyung and John. We are recording episode 28, and it's a special episode because we are going to have a special guest later on in this episode. His name is Ezra Levine, the CEO of Collectable, and he'll be on to talk about his company as well as the Mint Collective, which is a 3-day sport collectibles event that Collectable will be hosting in January. But before we get into it and welcome Ezra, off the top today, let's talk about F1. You know, we've been kind of talking about F1 cards and getting excited about the grand finale. I guess it's this weekend. So yeah, thoughts? Do you think F1 cards are going to go through the roof after this weekend, or what's going to happen, do you think?
I personally think you see a bit of kind of that hype already in the price, to be honest. I think there's also room to grow. I don't think it's going to be a big bang. I think what you're seeing is kind of like the hype already included. But I will say it's an exciting finish to the year. So it could definitely bring a lot of attention, especially with the Netflix show leading up to it, and then kind of like the battle with Hamilton, you know, over the last couple of weeks where he was and to be in this position now. So I think there's a lot of personally, just based on the comments, I think there's a lot of Hamilton haters and a lot of people want Max to win, but you know who I'm rooting for.
Lewis Hamilton all the way.
Absolutely.
All right. For people who don't know, like I'm new to the F1 sport as well. I'm sure many of us are too, but apparently this final race will determine who the winner is between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. And I think they are tied in the standings, which apparently hasn't happened in years.
Right.
So definitely going to be an exciting ending finale to the season. John, what do you think?
I'm with Hyung. Like I think the market now is savvy enough to know not to overreact to this. So I think there will be obviously like a bit of a spike, but most of that spike has been happening over the last couple of months.
Sure.
What's important though is, Clark, guys like you and me that are not into F1 at all. I mean, I'll admit I actually have seen one or two races in my lifetime, and it was really interesting when I watched it, and you kind of get into it and the drafting and all that jazz. But what this really does is for guys like you and me that don't follow F1, our eyes are on it. Like we're into sports in general, and the fact that it's something this huge and such a like momentous occasion, I think even non-followers are drawn to it, and that's going to draw to that sport and that, you know, that area. So I think that's what's most important. And for Netflix, this is huge, man, because we're all going to get to watch this season kind of like how it unfolded on a Netflix series. So that's something that a lot of people are going to anticipate too. So for the F1 market and cards, I think this is just going to signify over the next 6 to 12 months, it's going to continue to be really, really solid. That's my prediction.
Sure. No, I totally agree with you. I was getting a little bit of FOMO leading up to this final weekend.
I know.
And I'm
Me
like,
too, man.
Shoot, it's too late right now.
It's too late.
I don't want to pay a premium. And I'm just looking at Hyung's Sapphire Lewis Hamilton cards in envy now. So I'll wait for the dip, maybe 3 or 4 months after this race. And hopefully I can scoop some up. Because I think the Netflix special isn't going to come out until the fall. So there might be a dip somewhere in the summer, you know, when people kind of forget about it.
Right.
But I'll have a few of the F1 cards on my watch list.
Nice. Yeah, it's crazy how, I guess, it goes back to marketing, right? With F1, and it's all about, you know, what's out there and the attention it's getting. And I think the more people like you guys, like even me, like no business with F1, but you know, like it's reaching us, and this is the power of the internet and digital marketing.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And
absolutely.
whether that's true value, that's probably not the case, but that's the power of of the marketing side to it, right? So it's
Right.
it's pretty crazy to see F1 cards like go in the direction that it has, because it
For sure.
doesn't make any sense. It's like, who else is there? It's like there's Max Verstappen. There's like a couple people that you're like, okay, that's it. And then who's gonna hold the base cards? Like, there's no value in those, right?
Yeah.
All right. So with that, we'll be excited to see who wins the race in our next recording. For now, we'll welcome our special guest, Ezra Levine. All right, as we mentioned before, we have a special guest on our podcast today, and we're excited to welcome Ezra Levine, the CEO of Collectable, which is a fractional investing platform for sports collectibles that launched, I believe, back in September 2020. You know, it's not a surprise with the tremendous growth of the hobby. We've been seeing more record-breaking $1 million sales of sports cards seemingly every month. But what I love about Collectable is that everyday collectors can now have the opportunity to own a part of some of these iconic sports cards where it was just simply unattainable before. Now, as impressive as what Collectable has been doing in the hobby space, they also put together a one-of-a-kind 3-day event for sports card collectors and investors called the Mint Collective, which is taking place from January 28 to 30 in Las Vegas. Looks like it's going to be an awesome event, and we can't wait to hear more about it from Ezra. So thanks again, Ezra, for coming onto the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Excited to be here. Excited to talk about Collectable, but also, you know, about our conference that we're running in January. I think it's going to be a really spectacular event.
Yeah, for sure. Now, but before we get into the Mint Collective, I was hoping that we can talk briefly about Collectable, just to give some context for our listeners on why, to me, it makes perfect sense for you guys to put on an event like the Mint Collective. So as I mentioned in your intro, Collectable is a fractional investing platform for sports cards and collectibles. Is it fair to describe or compare Collectable to an app like Robinhood or Wealthsimple here in Canada, where instead of buying fractional shares of stock, in a similar way, users can buy fractional shares of sports cards like the Michael Jordan 1986 Fleer rookie?
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, in some ways, we created the stock market for high-end blue chip sports collectibles. When you think about our model versus the stock market, a lot of it will look very familiar to people. You know, we take companies public. These companies are not, you know, real, you know, companies that have employees and that generate revenue, you know, but they are collectibles, right? So we take a Mickey Mantle 1952 Topps, right, or a Michael Jordan PSA 10. We create a little mini company out of it, and then we sell shares to the public. And we run a traditional, almost exactly like an investment bank does for Facebook going public. We run almost a traditional IPO process. And then, you know, we have a whole, almost exactly like a stock market for sports collectibles. So every day, 9:30 Eastern to 4 o'clock Eastern, same stock market hours that everyone's sort of accustomed to, you know, for the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. We do that on our platform, Collectable, for blue chip sports collectibles. So yeah, I think it's very fair to say that, you know, through Collectable, you can now trade Jordan and Gretzky and Mantle and sort of the goats of sports, if you will, in the same way you could trade Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. So really, really cool thing for the hobby, really cool thing for collectors and investors. And yeah, I mean, our mission here is really to democratize, very buzzworthy, you know, sort of term, of course, but that's really what we want to do, is democratize the world of blue chip sports collectibles, make the most iconic, the most investment grade, the best opportunities in sports collectibles available to the masses.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Like you mentioned, it's making things a lot more accessible for the everyday collector. So I love that about Collectable. One of the questions I get a lot when I talk about companies like Collectable, mostly from old school collectors, is that where's the fun of investing in a card when you can't physically touch and hold the card itself? So I'm wondering, are you finding that most of the users on Collectable are more investor types, maybe even generally skewing younger, where they see sports cards and collectibles in a different way, maybe like as a legitimate alternative asset class?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. When we first launched Collectable back in September of 2020, we got that question a lot more than we do now. I think, you know, so given the rise of digital collectibles, NFTs, and also, you know, the rise of vaulting, where a lot of people are utilizing third-party vaults where they actually are, you know, their high-value items, they're not physically with them anymore. They're just, you know, sort of in your account on, you know, one of the different vaulting places. that question is getting less and less relevant. Actually. And we're seeing people, as long as they know that they own it, they can show it off and kind of have that pride of ownership factor.
Yeah.
That sometimes they don't really care if they have it physically or digitally. I mean, obviously some people do. And, for those people, they might not be sort of the core collectible user today, but we are seeing, sort of a widespread adoption of digital in all forms. And, I think that definitely has lent itself nicely to collectible success.
Nice. And you don't have to worry about security, I guess, if you have a big card like that at
You don't
home.
have security. You don't have to worry about your mother accidentally throwing away your card. You don't have to worry about any of that, right? You know that you're an owner. You don't have to worry about any of the pain points. You don't have to submit it to be graded. You don't have to do any of that. You literally go onto our platform. You click buy shares in whatever increments you want, and it automatically gets populated to your digital portfolio, and you see the values fluctuate. And you can buy, sell, trade at will, essentially.
What I like about that too is just bringing more people into the hobby, like who otherwise might have not been a collector or into the hobby at all. So
yeah, I mean, I think that this is a really powerful thing to kind of really expand the hobby. I mean, I think there's lots of pain points historically in and around the hobby. Obviously, the hobby is an incredible community, and there's lots of people who love to collect and to invest. But there have been real notable pain points. And, I would say one of the biggest barriers to entry at the high end of the industry, right? Obviously there's, lower price points accessible in different types of cards and memorabilia items. But, at the high end blue chip investment grade stuff, I would argue the biggest barrier to access is price points, right? I mean, we see it almost every day now in the headlines, $1 million sales here, $1 million sales there.
Right.
And it's pricing a lot of people out of the hobby, right? And so, you're kind of left with two options now, right? Option one is to, just collect what you can afford or invest in what you can afford, but you're kind of pushed lower and lower into the quality spectrum. Or you can maintain or even go up the curve in terms of quality and do it fractionally, right? So really what we think we're solving for is owning the best of the best in whatever price points you can afford. And I think that's a really powerful thing for the hobby. And I think it's a really powerful thing to also educate people. I think we've seen this massive boom over the last year, but we've also seen, in some of the lower, sort of the lower scarce items, a real kind of coming to Jesus moment where these prices are coming down, and people are starting to realize that the best place to be if you want to make money and have a real good store value is at the upper end of the industry, and we're one of the only games in town for that.
Yeah, completely agree. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, is Collectable only open currently to U.S. residents due to financial regulations and such?
Yeah, it is. And we're working really active to kind of solve for that. There's, as you can imagine, we are a regulated company. We've chosen as sort of a matter of company strategic priority to embrace regulation. I think we were talking before about barriers to entry and kind of pain points of the hobby. Another big one of that is, unfortunately, this industry has had a lot of bad actors, and there's been a lot of, of things that have occurred that have eroded collector and investor confidence. We think that in order to solve for that, you need to provide a much greater sense of legitimacy, a much greater sense of transparency, a much greater sense of regulation. And so we've embraced regulation actively, for that primary reason. The caveat to that, of course, is that when you embrace regulation, you are subject to regulation, and there are securities laws around operating in different countries and different provinces. Yeah. What we see is real global demand for our business and for participating in the way we're offering. So we're working very actively with regulators and different sort of parties that are in the ecosystem to facilitate that. And our hope is that we're able to really open up international markets sooner rather than later. We're hoping for at some point in 2022, but it's definitely firmly on a roadmap for sure.
Okay, that's great to hear, because we're a Canadian podcast, so I know a lot of Canadian collectors are looking for something exactly like this to be able to invest.
We definitely see demand from Canada. I would say it's funny. We had a call earlier this morning with our with our team over here, and we all pinpointed a wish list for countries we want to open up as soon as we can. And Canada was front and center. I think so. Canada's our number one wish. We're prioritizing Canada first and foremost out of all other countries.
Nice.
So again, our hope is that at some point in 2022, we're able to operate in Canada.
That's great to hear. Yeah. Funny enough, most of our listeners, according to our data, are still Americans. So I'm sure they'll find value in this episode too. But All right, let's move on to something I'm excited to hear about is this upcoming event in late January, the Mint Collective, as I was saying before. It looks amazing, and the fact that Collectable is at the center of it makes perfect sense to me, as the event is about celebrating the evolution of the hobby. Now, can I ask, how did this come together? Like, where did the idea formulate? And how did it go from there?
Yeah, sure. So the idea really came about. We actually signed a joint venture with the global sort of entertainment, sports, marketing, and agency prowess, called IMG and Endeavor. IMG and Endeavor has been increasingly active in the collectibles category, and they pinpointed Collectable as one of those companies that's kind of changing the game a little bit, right? That's kind of sort of innovating and growing the hobby in really exciting, interesting ways. And so we struck up a deal with them where, they're experts in throwing live events. We think we're experts in our market, and we've got, a real network here that we can, sort of curate the event. So, it's been a beautiful relationship in that sense, where they're kind of doing what they're really good at, and we're doing what we're really good at. And, the sort of culmination of that is our event in January. It's going to be a really, really cool event. I mean, the real mission behind it is almost purposefully not to make it about collectible, right? This really is not about collectible. We really want to, expand the hobby. We want to expand, the industry. I always say that more innovation and more change has probably occurred in our hobby over the last 18 months than I would argue over the last 18 years, right? I think, there's a lot of questions, right? There's a lot of meaty topics to be discussed and debated. And we really wanted to kind of put together, a unique weekend that brought some of the best minds and leading figures and, real sort of key industry leaders together to kind of chart a path forward. We want to celebrate the past. The hobby's an amazing place, an amazing community, but we also, don't want to turn a blind side to the fact that there's a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of innovation. We really just wanted to kind of throw an event that, grew the pie together, that celebrated the history of it, but also embraced the change and innovation that's to come, and to hopefully do it in a really cooperative and collaborative way. So, it's been a huge labor of love for Collectable and for IMG, but you're gonna, when you're there, it's not gonna feel like a commercial for Collectable, right? This is really, we're trying to bring in a lot of different vendors and partners and companies. Some, I get this question a lot. You're including this company, but they're competition to you. I'm like, they're not competition. Where, I would rather own, smaller market share in a much, much, much larger industry than be a dominant player in a smaller category.
Good point.
So
good point.
We are absolutely trying to expand the reach of the hobby to kind of make people understand that there's a lot of different participants now, right? There's the collectors and the breakers and the content providers, but there's also investors, right? And people looking at this as an investment. So again, really kind of merging the gap of, passion and profits, right? Investors and collectors. Sure. Everyone has a role there. And so really what the Mint Collective was designed to do was to kind of put on a platform that really kind of merged those two worlds and did it in a very collaborative way.
Yeah, no, that sounds really cool. It's funny how this event is in Vegas too, because Hyung, do you remember one of our previous podcast episodes?
It was like our first one, yeah. We always said somebody needs to do it in Vegas, and it's going to be innovative, right? And that's what it's all about. And we were saying this back in probably June, July, and I'm glad that we could actually see that come into life, because this is exactly what's needed in the hobby is innovation and change, right? With technology coming, we say this a lot in our podcast. It's creators that like yourself that are creating these future timelines or these solutions to the problem that industries have, and the more people and more leaders that can do it, it's just going to grow the hobby and kind of go to the place that I guess everybody kind of wants the hobby to go to, I guess, right? So. Sure.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on there. Yeah, I mean, look, I think Vegas definitely adds a little bit of sex appeal to the event. Obviously, everyone loves being in Vegas. The event is actually coinciding, I believe, with the NFL championships. The championship round, right? So the conference championships, right? So everyone loves being in Vegas during the conference championships. So there's that added layer. But it's Vegas. It's at MGM. It'll also be at the UFC Apex Center. So it's going to be a star-studded event in the hobby. It's going to be. I've heard it compared to kind of the ESPYs of the hobby, right? So a real facelift to a lot of the more traditional shows that you see. But again, there's going to be things about this that look very familiar. There's going to be, a marketplace on Saturday, which is it'll be like a card show, right? Like, vendors and speakers. Awesome. It'll feel very familiar. and there's going to be things about it that will feel unique and innovative and different. And again, that's really our way of, sort of doing what we say we're going to do, which is we're going to celebrate the past and celebrate, what people love about the industry. We don't want that to change. We just want to also embrace the future of it too, right? So there's going to be a lot that you recognize and a lot that feels very familiar, and some things that we're hoping to integrate that will sort of embrace change as well.
Absolutely. I don't know if you heard of the Collision conference, but the Mint Collective event reminds me a little bit about that. This huge tech and digital marketing multi-day conference where there are well-renowned speakers and network opportunities. And I feel like that's what Mint Collective will also bring to the table, where you can just network with fellow collectors, fellow industry players. And the speakers, like if you look down the list, it's a pretty impressive roster. Can you just list some of those speakers that you've lined up for the 3-day event?
Yeah. And there's more signing up every day, but so far we have Dana White, right, who's the president and founder of UFC. Obviously, is a massive leader. We got Josh Luber, obviously from Fanatics, will be there. We have Ken Golden will be there. We've got Kevin from PSA, who's a new president of PSA. I mean, honestly, the list of people is really, really strong, and I think most real hobby leaders are either going to be there personally, or they're going to have some sort of involvement in it, or send other people from the company. So yeah, I mean, it'll be sort of a who's who of the industry, but also who's who of kind of sports business. I think that what's really interesting about the hobby, and I've said this a bunch of times, but it really lives at the intersection of a lot of different types of businesses and industries. I mean, I'd say, obviously there's the true collecting part of it, right? The hobby part of it. And that's amazing. That's the foundation, the bedrock, right? But then you're also branching to the area of kind of sports speculation, right? So in the sense where, you have, it's being compared now to that third-headed monster to fantasy sports and sports gambling. People are looking at collecting and investing and, sort of collectibles as another way to speculate on sports. And the case I always make is this is kind of the only way to quote unquote speculate on sports, which historically over time has made money. Again, if you speculate on the GOATs, right? You're not, there's a higher probability of making money buying, Michael Jordan, holding on for long periods of time than, playing a daily fantasy league or betting on, who's going to win the MVP of the NFL season that year. But it's also, the other really perhaps most impactful kind of intersection that the hobby is veering off into is in the realm of a legitimate alternative asset, right? Where you bring in these massive pools of capital of, who are looking at this as a legitimate sort of diversified asset to invest in. When I tell you that, I kid you not, there's trillions of dollars on the sidelines that are looking at alternative assets like collectibles. And it's really up to us if we want that, kind of participation from those institutions to kind of make the case for why this deserves to be part of it. And I think what's really awesome is that sports collectibles at the high end have incredible stories to tell and have a long history of performance, both in various market climates, that I think make it a really attractive alternative asset investment. But it's really up to us to create that narrative, to really create that narrative and tell that story. I think that this event will definitely help do that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty exciting. I only have one question left, but John, do you have anything to ask? I know you were had a question about one thing.
Yeah, Ezra, I'm gonna hit you with the hard-hitting questions. Number one, are you a collector yourself? Who do you PC? And do you currently have a prized possession?
Well, it's funny. Like when you're kind of creating a business, oftentimes you're trying to solve a problem for yourself, right? So in some ways, Collectable was a brainchild. I mean, of a lot of people, of course, but one person who really stuck out to me was my father. Right? My father's been a collector for a long, long time, but he had 3 kids, and he wasn't independently wealthy, but he had 3 kids, but he loved the hobby, and he always collected the best that he could afford. And a long time ago in the hobby, the prices of things weren't as high as they are now. He owned some incredible stuff, which are now 7 figures plus. Back then they weren't even 7 figures. Right? But now they're 7 figures plus.
Yeah.
And so when the idea of kind of fractionalizing these things came about, and I just got his opinion as to whether or not this is something for the that would be valuable for the industry. He was like, oh my, like if your company existed 20 years ago, I would still be an owner of some of the best items in sports, and they would have appreciated dramatically, right? So it was that sort of firsthand experience through my dad that kind of really shaped what we've created with Collectable, is to create something that, you can PC whatever you want, maybe not in the exact same form that you're PCing it. So when you look at my PC, my PC is almost all fractional. I mean, at this point, right? So my PC consists of LeBron exquisites and Mantle eights, Chamberlain, game worn items that are historically rare. So, I collect the best of the best fractionally, but I do it in price points and increments that I can afford. And that really is, I think, the coolest thing about Collectable is your PC can be literally the best that this industry has to offer, right? But you can do it in ways that are affordable to you.
Yeah.
Well said.
Now, I guess the last question, I believe I saw on the Mint Collective website that you're also going to be speaking at the event. And I think you'll be addressing 2022 predictions in the hobby. I was wondering if you could share with us one or two predictions that you think will happen in 2022, especially with this past year. In January, February, we saw a massive boom, and then it kind of settled down into the summer, and now it's kind of stabilizing. So yeah, I'm curious to see your thoughts on how the hobby is going to be in this coming year.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing I think we can definitely expect, I don't think it's a prediction because it's already occurring, but I think there's one thing we can continue to expect is continued change and evolution in the hobby. There's amazing companies, not just Collectable, but amazing companies that are well capitalized, that have rock star leaders and real entrepreneurs and big backers that are investing aggressively and heavily into the category. So I think you're going to see some of those, the sort of fruits of that labor, continue to play out in 2022. I guess if there are two predictions I'd give to you guys, and I've actually said these a few times recently, but so I'll say them again. One is I think you're going to see not one but multiple 8-figure confirmed sales in the hobby. Right?
Wow.
Massive sales take place that are going to be real headline worthy. And I also said this, which some people think I'm crazy, but I think I'm going to be right. I don't think it'll be that long until you see a 9-figure sale. I don't think it'll.
There we go. That's crazy.
Not in 2022, but I think you project that a couple years, and I would not be surprised within the next 5 years you see a sports collectible item sell for $100 million.
Wow, insane.
The other prediction I'd give you, and not necessarily a targeted prediction, but just sort of a kind of a macro forecast, if you will, of where I think the industry is going, is I think you're going to see sort of continued, if this is even a word, right, kind of mainstreamification of the hobby, right? I think you're going to see the hobby and collectibles really kind of take its firm place as truly that third-headed monster to fantasy sports and sports gambling. I think you're going to see it truly take its place as a legitimate alternative asset investing, right? I think, and you're already seeing it. I mean, you have companies like Blackstone, or you have, you have Fanatics obviously made a sizable investment. You have Amazon getting into the hobby recently. You have Netflix who's doing, a show on Ken, right? I mean, there's lots of the things that are unfolding and occurring that's really kind of positioning the hobby as really cool, right? Like really mainstream. I mean, I always go back to just an anecdote. In my previous life, I worked in finance. I worked on Wall Street, and I made a big career change to kind of leave the public financial world to come into collectibles, and that wasn't long ago. That was 2 years ago, essentially at this point.
Right.
I remember when I used to tell people what I was doing and where I was going, and it was always like it was always met with a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of like, really, like, wow,
yeah.
That like no one did, and it wasn't cool, and it wasn't relevant, and it was like kind of closeted, a little closet. You to be a collector. Sometimes you almost felt like a little bit ashamed of it, right? And now it's the exact opposite, right? Now it's cool and trendy and mainstream and sexy, and oh wow, you work on collectibles, right? It's like that perception has really changed, really changed big time. And I think that's going to continue to kind of solidify itself. I think the hobby is going to become really mainstream in a lot of different ways.
Nice. It's funny you say that because I think we all have some version of that story ourselves, getting deeper into the hobby space. But yeah, no, Ezra, thanks again for your time. We really appreciate your insight, what you've been sharing about Collectable and what you guys are doing there, and what we can expect from the upcoming Mint Collective event. It's going to be awesome.
Thanks, guys, and you'll be there in person, I understand, right?
We'll do our best.
We'll try. The borders.
We'll do our best.
The borders rules are changing all the time, so. But we'd love to be there.
Awesome, guys. Well, I hope to see you there in person. But again, thank you for having me on, for the support. And yeah, I think it's going to be a really exciting 2022 hobby for sure.
Great. Thanks, Ezra.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, that was another great interview. And like I mentioned right before we signed off with Ezra, pretty insightful, the things he was able to just bring to the table and just explain, and his what he thought about where the hobby was going. Yeah, what did you guys think?
What I really like about that whole collectible concept is I have friends asking about the industry, and they come from a background where, you know, they invest in crypto stocks, and it's kind of like it gives it a parallel almost, right? Sure. Whereas like as a collector, you try to, from a hobbyist perspective or a collector perspective, you're thinking, well, how do you liquidate? How do you sell? Do I have to list on eBay? All that stuff that is not, I guess, friendly to investors who are looking strictly to invest with an app. So I think it solves that solution
totally
of bringing a whole different, and you know what, a hobbyist might not be for this. I could see a hobbyist saying this is not what sports cards all about, right? And that's the kind of old way of thinking, in my opinion. And I believe it will serve its niche, and it's not even going to be a niche because it's going to be a mainstream, investment asset class where technology is going to allow you to purchase fractional shares very easily. So that's what I really, really like about it. Instead of explaining the whole, you got to list it on eBay, go on Facebook groups. It's like, you know what? Get the app. It's like Wealthsimple or whatever, any other broker or platform, and, buy and sell there, right? So I really like that there's that option.
Yeah, for sure.
No, it was interesting. I think as a hobbyist, Hyung's right. It would be polarizing. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would be completely against it, being the traditional. But the new investor age, it's something that's very appealing, right? And even for us, we're kind of in the middle. We're old school, and we also understand the young mindset. And I would totally be interested in fractional ownership of a Wayne Gretzky rookie PSA 10. That's something that I would never dream in a lifetime that I would sniff at. And to know that, especially if you're just straight up thinking investment. So when the Gretzky first sold at $1 million, I thought that was a steal. Insane for me, somebody to think that. Yeah. But knowing, if you know the larger market, if you know that crazy high-end space, so far it's proven at every price point, I don't think any comp has ever come down, because most of these cards don't see the light of day. So the moment they show up, it gets scooped for any price, multiple X of the previous sold that was maybe 9 years ago or 6 years ago or whatever, right? So I think when you're playing in this space, a lot of people have to understand you're not buying into a fractional ownership of a $10,000 Luka. You're going into Honus Wagner, Wayne Gretzky, things that are pop 1, pop 2 in, that you don't see. These are like, we're talking Mona Lisa of sports cards, right? So it's really cool to see. And I think my greatest takeaway from everything that he said was how bullish he is on his predictions. So seeing an 8-figure card, I think I'm with him there. I think we can see that for sure. And then seeing a 9-figure card, it's crazy for him to say that, but that's his confidence in the high-end space. And if a 9-figure card appears in the high-end space, I think that only does justice, or it only helps the rest of the market. And I think for people who are right now scared of the base game and it's falling and it's super cheap, we're going to start bailing. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Luka hoops and Luka base like that are going for $200 right now at a price point of $2,000, $5,000 5 years from now. So
it's like the rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Another thing, Clark, I want to mention is I feel like, people have been doing this in the hobby, the fractional shares, like yourself. You probably own a fraction of a card. It's no different, right? This is just legitimizing that and with obviously different cards, but I know a lot of people that already practice this in the hobby, where it's like, hey, a 25% or a 10% ownership of this card because the initial investment was 10,000 and we agreed to sell at X amount of dollars, right? And then you split it between the two, right? Or the 8 or whatever, whoever's involved, right? So it's just a way to kind of like, collectibles is a way to kind of actually I guess manifest that into a digital way where it's official, where they're a proven market, they're a credible asset class now. So it's again providing that for that end user.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Right.
And hopefully it comes to Canada. That's why I wanted to ask that.
Absolutely,
be open to Canadian residents.
100%. Yeah.
Nice. I like what he said about the whole new, I guess, generation of investors being used to, and even us getting used to newer technologies like NFTs and vaulting. Remember, I think we talked about that in our past podcast episode, where it's not uncommon anymore for people to buy higher end cards and just send it right to the vault. They won't even see it, they won't even touch it, but they know they have it. So collectible in that sense, there's no major difference than owning something where you can't physically touch. But that you have ownership or part ownership of it. So yeah, I can see it definitely taking off. And last thing I really want to mention before we go on is like the Mint Collective. Sounds like a great event. It would be awesome if we were able to go end of January. But I don't think this will be the last one. So if it's a success, it might be one of those annual events. And if not this coming year, 2023, we got to put it on our calendar.
Absolutely.
All right, so we can't finish off this episode without playing our weekly segment of Pick One. And this week it is our Hot Takes edition. So we're going to present two hobby hot takes, and then we're each going to debate which one is more likely or we think is more realistic. All right, so Hyung, lead us off as usual.
All right, let's go with a little, I guess, what's in the news lately. With a lot of Barry Bonds talk in the Hall of Fame, and also Tiger Woods' comeback. So I thought I think personally both are super undervalued. Some people could disagree with me, but Barry Bonds' cards are undervalued versus Tiger Woods' cards are undervalued.
Okay.
Which one are you guys going to take?
Can you, for the sake of people who haven't heard any recent Barry Bonds news, is the feeling out there that he would be inducted?
Well, I think the majority of people believe that he should be inducted. I myself as well agree. This guy is the greatest baseball player of all time. We're talking about GOATs, and he's one of them. And there's an asterisk beside it. And obviously, it's debatable in terms of like the whole steroid era and stuff like that. But it's undeniable that he was one of the greatest baseball players of all time. True 5-tool player. I got to see him in the 80s when he was with Pittsburgh, and then go into the 90s and then crush it in the 2000s. So three eras where I used to see. So that's the talk right now. Does Barry Bonds kind of warrant the Hall of Fame? In my opinion, his career 100% does. His cards, I remember at one point that 1986 Topps traded, not the Tiffany, just the base. They were going for like $100, $150, and wow. They've increased a bit. They've gone up. Obviously during the boom, and then it kind of fizzled down. But I am seeing a slight increase in Barry Bonds cards as well. So, okay. And then Tiger Woods, obviously we've heard about his accident, but his recovery, and now just recently he's noted that he's gonna golf with his son in that tournament. Right. So he's up and running too. So I believe Tiger Woods cards, we've seen a surge last year at around this time in Tiger Woods price. It's hit rock bottom again. So I think his prices are undervalued.
Okay. John, you want to go first?
Yep. I agree with both. You know what I'm going to pick. I'm picking Tiger Woods. I think Barry Bonds, he's not as, other than the possible Hall of Fame induction news, he's not necessarily that relevant in current sports. And I do think his card is undervalued, but he's also still pretty polarizing, because not just polarizing in his career and the legitimacy of his career, but he's also polarizing in his character and personality. There's a lot of people he rubbed the wrong way. So he's polarizing in two aspects of his life, which makes it tough, right? Some people, I think for polarizing characters, like Carmelo we talked about and stuff like that. Even Tiger. Tiger was also pretty polarizing at one point. But there is a time where people kind of forget, and then you go into GOAT conversation, and then it's all about legacy, and you love the guy, and you want to give him a swan song and a standing ovation. Barry Bonds is one of those guys that's one of the greatest of all time, but he's still polarizing. I think there are still people that don't see him in a positive light. So for that reason, I don't choose Barry Bonds. And then on the flip side, Tiger Woods, he's like transcendent amongst all sports. You could call him the greatest of all time of all sports. He could be on that upper echelon of greatness. And with like the Netflix series coming out and him making a comeback and golf cards in general being really undervalued, I think for me, it's a no-brainer. Tiger's as pricey as a lot of Tiger stuff is already, I still think he's really, really undervalued.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I think what you said at the very end there is pretty much swaying my decision. I think Tiger cards are still pretty maybe it's because I'm always looking at higher end Tiger cards, so it's not like rock bottom. Like you might have seen a dip, but I could definitely see growth for it. That being said, but I think when you look at the prices of Barry Bonds, if he does get inducted into Hall of Fame, it's so cheap right now. Like I think the upside of him being inducted into the Hall, you'll make a nice profit. And so I think in terms of undervalued, which is more undervalued, I think Barry Bonds is more undervalued. And he's one of the I agree with you 100%. He's definitely a polarizing character, right? But for people who know baseball, like even before the Royd era, like he was an all-star. Like sometimes I think like, why did he have to do Roy's? Like, could he be sufficed with 50 home runs, not 70 home runs?
He had to beat McGuire and Sosa.
That's right. His ego got in the way as usual. So, but he was a great 5-tool player, like you said, Hyung, throughout his career. And then, of course, he generated that power near the end, but even more power at the end. But yeah, no, if the conversation is there that he could make it into the Hall, and I think, you know what, as a former journalist and writer, and I know the writers vote for people to get into the Hall. Like we all get softer when we get older. You know what I mean? So like there's forgiveness in there. I can see Bonds just squeaking. I know there's a time limit in terms of getting into the Hall, but there's a chance. I believe there's a chance. But Roger Clemens, on the other hand, no.
So you got Barry Bonds?
I got Barry Bonds.
Yeah, I'll play devil. Before you go, Hyung, I'll play devil's advocate. Like, I think the market is slick and smart enough now. I think that Hall of Fame news or induction spike that people kind of rely on, I feel that's sailed. So I think for people buying Barry Bonds, thinking that it will spike because he's going to get that announcement, I don't. What kind of spike did we see with Derek Jeter? And this, we're talking all-time consummate pro. Like people love Derek Jeter outside of the Yankee market, right? So yeah, I'm just playing some devil's advocate. I don't know how much. I don't feel the Hall of Fame announcement is really gonna boost Bonds' cards all that much. To be honest,
but Jeter's cards weren't as cheap as Barry Bonds' rookie cards.
No, they weren't. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And I think over both players, like you see Tiger Woods' auto, the higher end stuff, those aren't coming down in terms of a price. So they are probably properly valued. There's some cards obviously that are undervalued, but for me, I think Barry Bonds in general is undervalued. I think one of his most sought after cards is his 1986 Topps Traded Tiffany. And it's basically reverse gloss, I think, front or back, whatever it is. It's a limited run in Tiffany, and it's a slow climb. I remember I passed on it at 2,500. It's over 11,000 now, and that was during the last 2 years where that was a card that nobody was talking about Barry Bonds yet. Kind of like the upper end echelon type cards, you're seeing steady growth in a long-term bullish run, right? So and then on the base cards, we talk about this. I've seen it, the Barry bonds go up to like $800 US and as low as like 150. Whereas Tiger Woods, I've seen, all the way up to 2000 last year on that upper deck, and as low as like 150, right? So I believe that Barry Bonds is a little more undervalued than Tiger Woods, even though I own no Barry Bonds. It's a good buying opportunity. I do own some Tiger Woods. If I'm going to buy today, I'm going to buy Barry Bonds.
All right.
Wow.
2 for Barry. Nice. Good one. John, you want to go up?
Yeah, I'll go. So I got modern case hits such as Kaboom, Color Blast Downtown are a bad long-term investment versus modern parallels, aside from the OG colors like gold, are a bad long-term investment. So we're talking Fast Break, Shock, Pulsar, those kind of things. Yeah. So modern case hits are a bad long-term investment, or modern parallels are a bad long-term investment.
I can go because it's pretty easy for me. Parallels are a really bad long-term investment, in my opinion. Just there's so many. I think I made fun of it in another episode where it's like chinchilla prism. Like you don't know what exists and what you don't know. Like they just make stuff up. And even if it's rare, I think Josh Luber actually talks about this in the case of one-of-ones. One-of-ones are rare, but if there's a lot of one-of-ones, then generally it doesn't become rare. I think the same scenario plays out for parallels. So unless they start to limit parallel cards, which I doubt companies like Panini will do because people love chasing anything and they just like stuffing those boxes. I just think parallels are a bad investment. And I think we've already seen it in this year's Panini Select Basketball. They just overdid it, and boxes aren't selling out. I could get one right now on the line. That was not possible during the Luka Trey year. That was not possible during the Zion year. But this year I could easily get one, and at a discount. So that has a lot to do with the number of parallels that are being printed, and therefore definitely a worse long-term investment.
Fair enough. I love flagship images and parallels. Like I think if you didn't mention that it was like not the true parallels, like you're talking about Shock or red, white, blue or whatever, those variants, Fast Break. I think they're personally undervalued, some of them, because I think it gets like too much hate. It's because it's a wave or something. It devalues, right? So there's that. But for me, the concern with Kaboom and other like stuff like Blank Slate, Color Blast, we could ask yourself, is it a trend, right? Like, are inserts a trend? Because before nobody wanted inserts. Now people love inserts, or at least some of the rare ones, right? So I think based on your question, I will still say I think the Kabooms are better long-term investments than the secondary parallels. If it was the first, like the primary parallels, I'd 100% be all over the primary parallels. But yeah, like Clark said, for me, the ones that I guess are kind of gimmicky, I guess I don't really think it's a good long-term investment. Whereas, something rare like a Tom Brady Kaboom could be an enormous card in the future, right? So I do like the volatility of the Kabooms and how rare they are, right? So I'm gonna go as well with the Kabooms and Color Blast. I think are a better long-term investment.
Nice. I posed this question because this topic has been kind of top of mind recently for me. I've been trying to decode it or really think about what the heck is happening with the hobby. I'm continually frustrated, I think, at the path Panini has been taking with a lot of their products, especially like Select and just overprinting chase cards. And then I thought of modern case hits because when you look at this year's Absolute Football, and I don't actually know I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it seems like the Kabooms aren't case hits anymore. It looks like a lot of people are getting them a lot more frequently. They're coming out of blasters left, right, and center. So it really got me thinking about case hits now too. Like when Hyung said it was a fad, I mean, we could have got Vladdy and Bobichette PSA 10 Kabooms 2 years ago when the pandemic started. I didn't know anything about the hobby, but I remember seeing it. I used to be into comics when I was younger. So I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. It's kind of marrying kind of comics and sports cards together. And it's a rookie card. And it was $90 Canadian for a PSA 10.
I remember that, yeah.
I was thinking of getting it, except I thought this is not really a main rookie card, so maybe not. And then fast forward now, and Hyung is saying it's kind of trendy. It's the latest thing, so all people are into it. But once people it really comes down to that demand, right? So if people turn eventually, the hobby says it's awesome now, but hobby in the future, let's say they start overprinting Color Blast. You know they're going to keep coming with Color Blast. You know they're going to keep coming with Kaboom. It's not a one-year thing. They're going to keep releasing them. And as they become more and more and more and more regular, are they still valuable? Even the older ones, are they still, even if it's pop 20, are they still that desired or that valuable? So it really got me thinking. It's a head scratcher. And I think for me, I'm going to pick the case hit just because of a coin flip. I'm going to pick the one that I actually like as of today. But I feel like both categories are in question for the future. I'm not super, super confident in either long term. I think Sports Card Investor came out with one of Jeff Wilson's guys came out with a video recently of talking, what's the next PMG? What's the next precious metal gem? And they actually went away. Most people say Kaboom or Color Blast or Downtown. And they went away from it and said, I think it's actually gold refractors, anything like gold prism or gold refractors. And I actually kind of agree. I think as more of this comes out, people are still really into that flagship image. And they're going to go after, if they don't know anything else, they're going to go after the main color choice. And the main color that's attractive is gold. And I think gold refractor is going to hold their value. And I think this is going to also, don't sleep on silver. Like refractors and silvers and optic hollows. I think as we get deeper and deeper and deeper and more stuff and more comes out, I think, to be honest, I think silvers and the OG colors, even if they're not numbered, might be the winners here. So for my case, I'm going to pick the case hits, but I think this is a pretty fascinating, for me at least, maybe I'm just nerding out a bit, but I think it's a fascinating conversation of what may happen in the future.
I like that gold take for sure. We talked about that before, yeah.
Yeah, I agree too. All right, good one. Mine is really related to what you said. I like for the record to say I thought of my pick one first. So, so this looks like I'm copying
Sorry,
John,
Clark.
but as a gentleman, I let him go first. So mine's more specific into the modern case hits. So on one side, do you think Kabooms are overrated versus Color Blasts being overrated? So do you think Kabooms are overrated or Color Blasts are more overrated? And I pose this question because I don't know, it's a personal thing. I don't see the long-term appeal of Kabooms. I get why it's cool and there's so many people that love it, but I don't know. I think Hyung, you mentioned it, like, is it going to be a fad? Is it going to be one of those trends that just kind of dies down eventually and then it becomes worthless or just worth a lot less? And I don't like, I guess you could say the same thing about Color Blast too, but I don't like how Panini just puts it into almost like random sets year after year. Like you could get a Kaboom in Absolute Football, like you said, but it could be in a Spectra next year, or it could, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's
that's
like
what they did with Color Blast, with Spectra, and then Prism, and then
I just don't like that. So I think it's just they might make it irrelevant themselves by just mixing it up in different cases, different sets. Sorry, in the future, but anyway, what do you guys think? Kabooms are more overrated or Color Blasts?
We're gonna get some flack from this one because Kabooms are people's lives.
People love them.
People's livelihoods.
I'm going there.
I personally, so Kabooms are I think a lot more desired than Color Blasts right now. I think color blasts are underrated. If we're saying right now, because I personally like the color blast better. But again, it's all preference at this point, of what I like. And I could see the Kaboom being more trendy, but trendy also means more volatility, right? So I think, I think I'm going to go with Color Blast personally, just because I personally like the Color Blast. I think it's a clean looking card. I do wish, like you said, it was in a standard set where it's constant, as opposed to being in an insert in different sets as well, because I think you're going to face the problem as they get trendy, they're going to print more. As they print more, it's going to devalue the brand, whether it's Kaboom or Color Blast. But with that said, I'm not hating on either. I do like both. I just hope that Panini, just has some, sense in their production and not to be too greedy and keep both inserts alive. But for me, it's Color Blast for sure.
Or overrated? Okay.
Yeah. No, sorry. Kabooms are overrated. Okay. I would probably sorry. Yeah, I'm buying Color Blasts.
Okay. Yeah. Kabooms are overrated. Okay. John.
Panini, if you're listening, be responsible, please. I agree. Like, I'm gonna pick Kaboom is overrated. I love both, and this could change in 6 months. But I pick it because my bias. You guys know me. I like Color Blast. So personally, coin flip between the two, I like Color Blast better. And then the absolute football situation of seeing Kaboom overprinted, and that's not to say Color Blast won't be, because when Color Blast comes out in the next couple of months, we could see overprinting Color Blast. We could see you getting one Color Blast in every 20 blaster boxes, and they just start pumping out, right? So it could be the same thing. So that's why I say Panini, be responsible. Like, we really, I don't want Panini to ruin these Color Blasts and Kabooms, and I'm sure nobody else does either. And I think that's one thing. If I were to compare Panini with Topps, I think that's where Topps is doing a great job, in that, well, number one of the complaints we had was they didn't create great case hits. So that's kind of here nor there. But in terms of the refractors, right? Even like this year, they knew they can really make a killing overprinting. But how many more refractors did they make? They made what? Aqua wave and teal wave and like pink wave. I think that was it. Like they didn't go like, fast break refractor, and they didn't create like hundreds of them, right? So I think for me as a hobbyist and as a fan of collecting sports cards, I like how Topps did it, but I'm kind of going on a tangent. But yeah, you guys know what I'm saying. So yeah, Kaboom. I'll pick Kaboom overrated for the choices that I said.
All right, I think this is a bad group to ask this question to, because it's going to be a sweep. I'm already biased against Kaboom. So yeah, Kabooms are definitely overrated in my opinion. I get it. I get why people love Kaboom, the comic book effect and whatnot, but it just seems a little bit too gimmicky for me. Whereas Color Blast, and this is obviously a very, very subjective opinion, it's more timeless. So I'm gonna say, like, you look at Color Blast, like, it looks beautiful to me, right? And I think it'll hold longer over time, and therefore, it's a better investment at least. But
imagine in the NFT world, you could experience the Kaboom or Color Blast. You put it on a VR headset and it's like Kaboom, and it's that NFT, that digital. Anyways, I agree.
Hyung, you should get on that right now.
Hey, you never know where the future is taking us, right? I just see some crazy stuff with the metaverse and stuff, and I'm gonna be a card dealer in the metaverse. That's what I decided. I'm gonna be selling Kabooms and Color Blasts.
That's not a bad idea. Together, Let's buy a lot to create a hobby store. Yeah.
Nice. So, well, it's. I think this episode just came full circle. I think Ezra mentioned, with the Mint Collective, bringing all these people together, because there's going to be a lot more changes in the hobby. This is what the event's all about, to continue the evolution of the hobby, have these currently wacky ideas, fleshed out, but then next thing you know, it's happening, right? And I think that's what's exciting about the hobby right now. The possibilities are endless. So nothing but good things happen when you get a lot of like-minded people together and just to really hash out ideas, and just excited to see the hobby grow in that way. But thanks to everyone, as usual, for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed the interview with Ezra Levine. We thank him one more time for coming on. And you know what? If you have a 1v1, if you guys have a pick one out there that you want us to debate, feel free to send it to us, at 5Card Guys, or via email at hello@5cardguys.com. Or we have our Instagram account for Cards to the Moon, this podcast right here, at Cards to the Moon, one word. You could also DM us there. So we'd love to hear your feedback and input as well, instead of us just coming out with 1v1s each week by ourselves. So yeah, thanks again, guys. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and get your weekly notices for our podcast episodes coming out every Tuesday. Till then, we'll see you later. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5Card Guys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.